usually refers to visible light, which is visible to human eye and is responsible for the sense of sight. Light is an electromagnetic radiation within a certain portion of electromagnetic spectrum. So there are two general sources of light. The first is the natural light and the second is the artificial light. So the natural light is generated naturally, and the common source of light is like the sun, moon, and stars. The second is the artificial light. The artificial light is generated by light sources and usually contains some UV. Kinds of sunlight. First is the bright sunlight. It is a sunlighting condition where objects in an open space cast a deep and uniform or distinct shadows. Second is the hazy sunlight. It is a lighting condition that objects open space cast a transparent shadow. Third is the dull sunlight. It is a lightning condition of the sun that is no more shadow to be cast by an object in open space. Fourth is the artificial sunlight. Humans have been able to create and control light for 1,000 of years. And some example of artificial sunlight are those are man-made, like the bulbs, the fire in the matches, and etc.
Kinds of sunlight. Bright sunlight, hazy sunlight, dull sunlight. Bright sunlight is a sunlighting condition where an object in an open space casts a deep and uniform or distinct shadow. Hazy sunlight is a lighting condition the object open space casts a transparent shadow. Dull sunlight, it is a lighting condition of the sun that no more shadow to be cast by an object in open space. Artificial light. Humans have been able to create and control light for 1,000 of years. The earliest forms of lighting was with fire such as burning wood, candle, gas, or oils. Candles were made out of beeswax or tallow or animal fats.
Of electric light. Tungsten filament bulbs. They are cheap to make and easy to use. They contain a thin metal filament made out of tungsten, a type of metal. This filament becomes very hot when electricity flows through it and glows yellow-white. These bulbs last only about 1,000 hours because the filament becomes thinner and thinner as it burns. Neon lights. It is commonly used for advertising. Neon is a gas that gives out light when high voltage electricity passes through it. By changing the electric current, up to 5 different colors can be produced in the same tube. A neon light contains a tiny amount of neon gas under low pressure. Electricity provides energy to strip electrons away from neon atoms. Ionizing them, ions are attracted to terminals of the lamp, completing the electric circuit. Light is produced when neon atoms gain enough energy to become excited. Fluorescent tubes. They are widely used in the office and in home. Fluorescent tubes are glass tubes that contain mercury vapor. When an electric current is passed through the mercury vapor, it gives off ultraviolet light. This ultraviolet light is absorbed by phosphor powder that coats inside the tube and starts to glow to make a blue-white light. This light needs a special electronic starter to produce the high voltage needed to start the light.
Spectrum. Produced when white light is dispersed by a prism or diffraction grating. There is a continuous change in wavelength from red, the longest wavelength, to violet, the shortest. 7 colors are usually distinguished: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. The whole range of electromagnetic radiation with respect to its wavelength or frequency, and particular distribution of electromagnetic radiation, often showing lines or bands characteristic of a substance imitating the radiation or observing it. Kind of visible spectrum. The first one was red light. The visible red light has wavelength of about 650 nanometer at sunrise and sunset. Red or orange color are present because the wavelength associated with this color are less efficiently scattered by the atmosphere than the shorter wavelength color. Second was orange light. The visible orange light has a wavelength of about 590 nanometers. Third is yellow light. The visible yellow light has a wavelength of about 570 nanometers. Low pressure sodium lamps, like those used in some parking lots, emit a yellow wavelength of 589 nanometer light. Fourth was green light. The visible green light has a wavelength of about 510 nanometers. Grass, for example, appears green because all of the colors in the visible part of the spectrum are absorbed into the leaves of the grass, except the green. Green is reflected, therefore grass appears green. 5 was the blue light. The visible blue light has a wavelength of about 475 nanometers because the blue light wavelength is shorter in the visible spectrum. They are scattered more efficiently by the molecules in the atmosphere. This causes the sky to appear blue. Indigo light. The visible indigo light has the wavelength of about 445 nanometers. The last one is the violet light. The visible violet light has a wavelength of about 400 nanometers within the visible wavelength spectrum. Violet and blue wavelength are scattered more efficiently than other wavelength.
So the additive color. Additive color is color created by mixing a number of different light colors with shades of red, green, and blue being the most common primary colors used in additive color system. So subtractive color. Subtractive color model explains the mixing of a limited set of dyes, inks, pens, pigments of natural colorants to create a wider range of colors, each the result of partially or completely subtracting, that is, absorbing some wavelengths of light and not others. So because the additive colors use transmitted light, the colors appear much brighter and create a larger visible spectrum. It also producing millions of colors on screen. So while subtractive colors use reflective light, so they appear muted and contrast. So what is the importance light of photography? So one of the most important elements of creativity in photography is the light. So without light, your photography is nothing. Light is what allow us to convey informations and, more importantly, emotion in an image. Once you understand light, you will have the knowledge to create a wide variety of images, or your photography will become more nicer.
Kinds of exposure. Decrease exposure. This test is a shielding action. Minimize your exposure at dose radiation. Decreases dramatically as your increase. Standard exposure. Standard exposure is a principal standard exposure is the exposure value that produces an area and image with reflective ratio of the film of camera built-in exposure meter and auto exposure. Increased exposure, the amount of the public attention someone or something, especially advertisement of the product get and gain exposure. The product when being advertised to the blogger with a hope to getting more exposure.
Kinds of exposure. There are three kinds of exposure: decreased exposure, standard exposure, and increased exposure. Decreased exposure is to reduce or estimate at the least possible degree or amount to minimize the light. Standard exposure. The exposure value that reproduces an area of an image with a reflective ratio of 18% on film. Increased exposure. The more you expose the film or camera sensor to light, the lighter your photo will be.